Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. The Bigger Picture, only on Money FM 89.3.
Good morning. Welcome to The Bigger Picture. I'm Emaad, Akhtar. When you board an aircraft, you probably feel pretty safe because flying, after all, has historically and statistically been the safest mode of transportation. That being said, we can't run away from the facts, which point to incidents occurring at an increasing frequency. The crash of Air India Flight 171, for instance, back in June, which was the first fatal accident involving the Boeing 787, has turned 2025 into one of the deadliest years in the past decade for civil aviation. And it does raise important questions about aviation safety. So what actions are aviation experts and key stakeholders taking to ensure that flying doesn't become something we can no longer just take for granted? Joining us to answer those questions, Mitchell Fox, Director, Flight Safety Foundation. Good morning, Mitch.
Good morning, Emaad. How are you this morning?
I'm very well. Thank you for joining us this morning. Now, there's a lot more chatter these days about aviation safety. Why do you think it's risen to prominence now? Is it down to the fact that we've had more incidents lately, or are the increasing demands and complexity of the industry at large requiring airlines to take a more proactive approach?
Well, I think in your opening remarks, you made reference to the number of incidents that have occurred during 2025. Unfortunately, we did have a rise in accidents and serious incidents, and in particular in the Asia-Pacific region. Whenever an accident occurs or a serious incident in aviation, it's certainly something that the traveling public, the public in general, takes notice of. So yes, it has risen to prominence more than normal. Now, that's not to say that safety practitioners are resting on their laurels. Normally, we're very active in trying to anticipate and be proactive, if not predictive, on potential risks and to mitigate those risks before they become accidents.
So what are the most pertinent aviation safety issues right now then?
Well, I would say globally, there are three high-risk categories that we're concerned with, and I'll go in order of the rate at which they occur. Runway excursions, that's when the airplane on takeoff or landing leaves the confines of the normal runway, either to the side of the runway or at the end of the runway. Along with that, and it's what we call runway safety, is what we call a runway incursion, where an airplane inadvertently taxis onto a runway where there might be another airplane taking off or landing. Those are very kind of closely associated in the general category of runway safety. The second big category is what we call loss of control in flight, where due to a mechanical problem or due to an unusual situation that confronts the pilots lose control of the airplane in flight. Finally is what we call controlled flight into terrain. It doesn't occur very often, and in fact, it's very rare today, but that's where an airplane literally flies into the ground while it's under control. Many of these types of accidents, especially controlled flight into terrain, have substantially reduced in number. They're very unusual due to the advent of new technologies like advanced ground proximity warning systems that give pilots advance notice if they're in an unusual flight path. So those are the three highest categories, but there are other categories of concern. And most recently, I think what we saw in the press was some concern about encounters with turbulence, which was a subject that came to prominence last year.
Yeah, that's right. I think some new research has come out suggesting that the atmosphere will become more turbulent as climate change makes the air less stable. So in instances like that, Mitch, how do safety professionals go about addressing things that are within their control and things that aren't, like turbulence?
I would say that what we've developed over the years are highly proficient pilots who are extremely well trained, and they go through extensive training on the types of incidents or the types of occurrences that could occur on any flight. So they're extremely well trained, and they practice on a regular basis in very advanced flight simulation or flight simulators on how to handle various situations. Some of them, those situations are predictable, and so they're easier to mitigate. Turbulence is not always something that's easy to predict. You mentioned that. There's several different types of turbulence that you can encounter that can be forecast accurately by meteorologists. For example, the type of turbulence that you can encounter around thunderstorm activity. Those can be certainly prevented. We have onboard weather radar. We have extensive forecasts that the pilots have before they start a flight and while they're en route. Those types of incidents are fairly easy to mitigate the risk of having a dangerous encounter with that type of turbulence. There is another type of turbulence where there's a lot more research which is going on, which is an encounter into what they call clear air turbulence.
Yep.
And clear air turbulence is exactly what it sounds like. It's turbulence that you can encounter where there are no visible clouds. Our ability to predict that type of turbulence, and that's based on certain meteorological conditions such as the winds aloft, have been improving, but there's room for improvement in the technology. And there's a lot of research going on. There's also a lot of activity on how the information about potential encounters is shared between airplanes. So if an airplane ahead of you encounters clear air turbulence, it's how that information is widely shared. The International Air Transport Association has an initiative of that nature where they're combining forecasts and what we call pilot reports to better equip our pilots to be able to avoid those conditions. But you mentioned climate change, and it's something that is a consideration. There is some evidence, I won't say it's conclusive, but as global warming increases, that the number of turbulence encounters or your risk of encountering turbulence may also be increasing. But again, there's a lot of research ongoing in that area.
Yeah, fair point. As an outside observer, the assumption is that the focus would by and large be on the technical aspects of flight safety. But what about the intangible stuff? You know, things like encouraging safety cultures where aviation personnel are supported for reporting hazards and mistakes. What's that like currently?
Well, I'm going to correct that a little bit. If you asked that question 20 or 30 years ago, you would have been correct that the focus was on the technical aspects of flight safety. But we've grown quite a bit, both in terms of what's typically called accident investigation, but also taking a more predictive approach that we sometimes call safety management systems, which are taking a more proactive or predictive approach to safety. Increasingly in both, let's say, the after the fact of an accident or serious incident, or when we're leaning into safety issues, we are looking more and more into the human side of aviation safety. And you mentioned safety culture, and that's really at the top of the list. Within the Flight Safety Foundation, both globally and regionally, we're having extensive discussions about what a positive safety culture is and how important a positive safety culture led by senior executives, that is influenced by senior executives, but goes all throughout management ranks to line workers, sort of line pilots, as cabin crew, as maintenance engineers. That positive safety culture is essential. And when we find that there's a breakdown in safety culture, those types of organizational issues can be very much contributing factors that can be identified either after the fact, as I mentioned, accident investigation, or as we lean into the safety issues. We're looking at other issues such as human factors. I think increasingly we're looking at the organizational issues that can be the predecessors of any of the sort of technical issues that can occur later on.
All right, Mitch, just going to move this along to the final question. I want to get your take on who the responsibility lies with when it comes to aviation safety. Is it the manufacturers? Is it the regulators? Ultimately, where does the buck stop?
It is a collaboration. There is no buck stops at any single point. It's like saying, what was the single cause of an accident? There's no such thing as a single cause of an accident. We've learned that over the last 40 or 50 years. There's always many, many contributing factors, and every party has an important part to play. So yes, the manufacturers have a part to play in producing the safest possible product. The airlines have a role to play in operating the airplane as safely as possible. And all of the individuals that are involved. And I think, you mentioned safety culture, you mentioned an increased focus on the human aspects of safety. I think that what we know is that everyone who's involved in aviation, from the people that are senior managers, the safety managers, to the pilots, the cabin crew, the people who are working on the ramp, loading the airplanes, everybody has their part to play. And where this all comes together is how we communicate among the parties. That's really what safety collaboration is all about.
Fair point. All right. We've been taking flight this morning with Mitch Fox, Director of Flight Safety Foundation. Mitch, thanks so much for your time.
It's a great pleasure.
All right. Have a good day. Stay with Money FM 89.3.
Before acting on the information on Money FM, please consider if it's suitable for your own investment objectives, financial situation, and risk tolerance. To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.